Japan is leading the world in pop music right now, and there's no better group to prove it than Higedan. From anime openings to chart-topping hits, Higedan has taken over J-pop, but it wasn't always like this. See, 10 years ago, these guys were miserable salarymen with nothing more than a dream, so they gambled everything. Years of sleepless nights and 12-hour bus rides just to perform small gigs. So how did they become Japan's #1 band? And what makes Higedan and J-pop as a whole stand out from most Western pop nowadays? Before we get there, let's back up to the man behind it all. Satoshi Fujihara formed Higedan in 2012, and he's been their frontman and driving force ever since. Born in 1991, Fujihara played classical piano as a child and dreamed of becoming a pro drummer. He grew up in the Tottori prefecture, one of the more rural areas of Japan where life moved at a slower pace. With fewer distractions, Fujihara was able to practice for hours on end like Bocchi, and he built a local reputation comparable to her Guitar Hero persona. By high school, he was a part of his school's brass band and a cover band with his middle-aged music mentors. The thought of going pro crossed his mind, but he ended up going to university and kept music as a hobby. During first year, he formed a band called Boston Tea Ceremony. They quickly made a name for themselves in the amateur band scene, winning several competitions and even earning the title of Japan's best college band in 2011. Around this time, Fujihara listened to a lot of heavy metal and music from black artists, especially Michael Jackson. He was such a big MJ fan that after watching this documentary film about him, he wanted to start singing. But there was one problem. Boston Tea Ceremony already had 2 vocalists. Fujihara wanted to sing, but he only had one means of doing it, starting another band with himself as the frontman. But who in their right mind would trust a drummer with 0 singing experience to lead their band? Luckily, he found 3 people who were just crazy enough to believe in him: Masaki Matsuda, Daisuke Ozasa, and Makoto Narazaki. Together, they formed official HIGE DANdism in June of 2012. The band has kept the same lineup ever since, and that's largely thanks to the trust they had from the very start. Higedan played everything from upbeat dance tracks to heartfelt ballads. They set out to make pop music that wasn't just catchy, but would also resonate with people on a personal level. They started out in Shimane, and their first goal was to sell out a 200-capacity live house alone, something no local band had ever done before. By 2014, Higedan won their first amateur band contest, winning a grand prize of 50,000 yen, equivalent to around 10 booster boxes. There wasn't much money to be made from music, and with graduation approaching, they had to pick between corporate life and pursuing music full-time. In Japan, it's not uncommon for bands to name themselves after some very questionable things. So if you don't speak Japanese, you might be wondering, what does Higedan even mean? Well, it literally means bearded man. See, the band hopes that when they reach the age where beards suit them, they'll still make music that excites everyone. Narazaki suggested the idea and then took dism from the word dandyism and added official for aesthetic purposes. Altogether, they're not just bearded men, but official mustache dandy men to be exact. Back in the day, they even wore these mustache outfits to match their name. And honestly, I would love to see them brought back. While Higedan are bearded men in name, they were gonna get beards a few decades early with how stressful their lives were post-grad. See, Matsuda was the only one who went all in on music from the start. But the other 3, they kept Higedan alive while juggling full-time jobs or studies, basically speedrunning burnout in their early 20s. Ozasa was finishing his engineering degree, and Narazaki worked at a police station, splitting his time between clerical duties and playing saxophone in the station's band. Now, I've covered over 20 artists on this channel, and I have yet to come across a story quite like Fujihara's. After graduating, he got a job as a bank salesperson. Japan gets a lot of excessive glaze online, but their work culture is among the worst in developed countries. Fujihara's hours are brutal, leaving him with no time to make music. So whenever he was traveling on his scooter between sales calls, he'd pull over on the side of the road and record melodies into his iPhone. But couldn't he have done this on the weekends? Well, as soon as Fujihara clocked out on Friday, he'd hop on a 12-hour overnight bus to Tokyo to play gigs, then get back Monday morning, take a quick shower, and head straight to work. Fujihara went as far to say that if a melody came to him during an important business meeting, he would quit right on the spot. To fully understand the weight of that statement, people in Japan literally hire external companies to help them quit their jobs due to the toxic work culture. Fast forward, and Higedan needed an agency, but most were put off by their limited availability. But they eventually found one that was willing to coordinate their live shows, and this led to their indie debut in 2015. Slowly but surely, Higedan built a local reputation, which led to them being featured in their regional newspaper. Fujihara could no longer keep his music life under wraps at work, and thankfully, his boss turned out to be incredibly supportive, even joining his fan club and attending concerts. Eventually, the rite of passage for every aspiring Japanese artist came up, moving to Tokyo. Unlike many of Japan's other top artists, Higedan weren't chasing music to escape poverty or because they had no other options. They had stable jobs and secure futures, but they loved music too much to let it go. Fujihara had doubts about leaving everything behind, but when he heard that his favorite artist was listening to his songs, that was all the reassurance he needed. After moving to Tokyo in 2016, Higedan's reputation grew with each release. Pony Canyon eventually signed them to a major label deal, and it became pretty clear early on that they were going to be a huge success. In April of 2018, they released their first studio album, which peaked at number 15 on the Japanese charts with 2 huge hits. The opening track has since become one of the most streamed Japanese songs of all time, while no doubt also made history. It marked the first time an indie band provided the theme song for a Monday 9 p.m. TV drama. All the years of juggling jobs, sleepless nights, and cross-country bus rides had finally paid off, but they were only getting started. In 2019, Higedan released their first major album, and it put them at the top of J-Pop. Traveler topped every Japanese chart it entered, but the real game changer was Pretender. It's currently the 4th most viewed Japanese song on YouTube, and at one point, it was also the fastest Japanese song to hit 100 million streams, until Yoasobi's Idol came along. By the end of the year, Higedan were Japan's 3rd biggest artist, making them the country's #1 band. Their success earned them an appearance on Kohaku Utaka-sen, Japan's most prestigious New Year's music show. Now, an invite on Kohaku isn't just a performance. It's a national stamp of approval that you've made it, especially with the older demographic. Higedan had Japan at their fingertips, and now it was time to take on the world. And how else does a Japanese artist go global besides anime? While Higedan did some anime songs in the past, in March of 2022, they landed their biggest project to date, the opening theme for Spy Family. It was one of the most anticipated anime of the year, an action comedy about a spy who builds a fake family for a mission, unaware that his wife is an assassin and his daughter can read minds. Both Spy Family and its opening were massive hits, with Mixnets even making it on the Billboard Global 200. If you were into J-pop, anime, or anything Japan related in 2022, you knew about Higedan. The gap between them and every other band seemed to be widening, but in 2023, it all changed. In March, Higedan announced a temporary hiatus. Fujihara had developed vocal polyps, a non-cancerous growth on one's vocal cord. He had surgery and made a full recovery, but this kept Higedan on the sidelines for most of the year. Although, considering the band hadn't taken a long break from activities for over a decade, it was probably overdue. Now, there are currently 4 big bands in Japan. Back then, Higedan was undoubtedly #1. But in their absence, Mrs. Green Apple took their crown, and it doesn't seem like anyone will catch up to them anytime soon. Higedan resumed activities later in the year, with them doing the theme song for the Spy Family movie, as well as performing on Kohaku for the 4th time. They've since done the opening for Blue Box, as well as holding their first stadium tour this year. Higedan aren't just one of Japan's best bands, they're also one of the best examples of what J-pop does right. In the past few years, I've been more drawn to the pop music coming out of Japan than the US, and it got me thinking, what is it about J-pop that I find so appealing? Well, I came up with 3 main reasons, and I can back up each one with a Higedan song. You may remember this Axis of Awesome video, which showed how tons of Western pop hits use the same 4 chords. Japanese music tends to use the same 6 to 10 chords, although a lot of songs tend to use the Royal Road progression. It's occasionally used in Western pop, but it's used all the time in anime. Production is more about how a song sounds, the mix, effects, and all the other studio techniques that shape the final product. Instrumentation, on the other hand, is about what's being played and how it's arranged, and that's where I think Higedan really shines. Of course, they got the usual band setup, but Higedan goes beyond this. They throw in other instruments and hire other musicians for recordings and sessions. Even with the standard instruments, they'll throw in extra guitar lines and some really funky bass lines. J-pop in general has given me so much more appreciation for bass. My favorite Higedan song is White Noise, which was the opening for Tokyo Revengers in 2023. Although the song was actually composed 10 years prior when the band was experimenting with progressive rock. The descending distorted guitar riff sounds so distinct, and the switch between this driving force and the more gentle piano bits in the verses makes the chorus explode with energy. Objectively, I think the band has better songs, but even after so many listens, White Noise still has me nodding my head every time it comes on. In a 2015 interview, Higedan said their goal was to become a national pop band, largely because they didn't think many other bands had a Motown background. For those unfamiliar, Motown was an American record label famous for its soulful and groovy sound. The band takes inspiration from a wide variety of places, especially black music elements like jazz and funk. It's what set them apart in their indie days, and in 2018, No Doubt was their first song to reach 100 million streams. It was praised for its disco sound, with many wondering where Higedan got such inspiration. Well, Fujihara credits the band's diverse inspirations to their roots in smaller hometowns, with 3 of the 4 members growing up outside big cities. Higedan never confines themselves to being only a pop band. Although a lot of Japanese pop is already heavily rooted in Western music like jazz, so it gives them more leeway to experiment and still top domestic charts. Now, I don't speak Japanese, so I can't judge or appreciate lyrics in the same way a native speaker can. But after going through the subtitles of so many Higedan songs, one thing that's clear is how passionate Fujihara is about songwriting. He writes about everything from love to self-growth, and doesn't shy away from more introspective topics. With the majority of Western pop songs about love, the focus is on physical attraction. However, Japan's more conservative culture tends to push more songs on the emotional side. Take Higedan's biggest hit Pretender as an example. It's a bittersweet love song about a man who realizes his partner's feelings don't equate to his own. Rather than pretending to stay in a relationship built on false hopes, he chooses to move on and accept the truth. Reading subtitles is one thing, but for anyone who's watched Spy Family, you're more likely to appreciate the lyrics of Mixed Nuts. The song is about the ups and downs of life and is named after Anya's love for peanuts. Fujihara uses various nut metaphors throughout, with my favorite being the one about relationships. It gets the message across in both a poetic and playful way. And that's the kind of charm that makes Higedan so unique. All in all, Higedan is proof that pop music can still be fun and meaningful in a time where labels only care about numbers. Their songs have so much replay value, and I hope that even when the band gets old enough to have beards, people will still be enjoying their music. Let me know what you think of Higedan, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more J-pop content. If you'd like to support the channel and help cover editing costs, I've got YouTube memberships now with exclusive perks. Otherwise, thanks for watching.